Welcome to the Predictive Playbook. I am John Ryan of SportsMemo.com. The major conference tournaments are going to get fired up tonight with the majority of the action taking place in the evening. I'm very proud and pleased to have Rob Veno join me on this show. He's a first timer on this show, and hopefully it'll be 1,000 times down the road. He is the founder and publisher of Rob Veno Sports. I encourage you very much to go check out his site, robvenosports.com. He's also the inventor of the vegasoddsmachine, which has a great feed of odds from different sports books, which you can use to your advantage as well. And he's a member of the legendary WagerTalk team, and I guarantee you he's going to give us some insight and probably some good free best bets on this show. Welcome, Rob, to the show. How's your week going today?
Yeah, it's only Wednesday, John. First of all, thank you for having me here.
It's a privilege.
Good to be here with you. Obviously, you and I under the same umbrella, but with different halves of the umbrella. We don't cross paths very much where videos are concerned. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invite. And yeah, it's conference tournament week, right? It's the busiest 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. In our business, just because of, and for those of us who live in the Eastern time zone now, which if you're going to do this for a living, I wouldn't really recommend the Eastern time zone. It'll drive you crazy. But yeah, it's right. We have games starting at 11 a.m. and they don't end. By the time I'm done in putting box score information and stuff, it's 2 a.m. and then it's right back at it all over again. So busy time of week. We don't complain about it because we love to do it. You and I were just saying that off air to each other, but great to be here. Hopefully the show enjoys a lot of success for you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Appreciate that. Why don't you give us a little story of how you got involved with this industry, and whatever else you want to share with us would be great.
Well, my story is a little from left field, John. I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in Connecticut, first 31 years in Connecticut. When I got married, didn't have children yet, we could see the writing on the wall that Connecticut's a very, very difficult state to live in financially. I made the cross-country move to Las Vegas 6 months ahead of my wife. She held on to a job in Connecticut while I moved to Las Vegas to search for one. And I was a ceramic tile man. My dad ran a ceramic tile business for 45 years. And I went out to Las Vegas in 1991, January of 1991, right as the Gulf War was beginning. Right then, the week I moved out there, stayed with a good friend of mine, and figured because Las Vegas was in a boom at the time when I moved there, John, Clark County had 450,000 population. By the time I left in 2002, it was up to 1.3 million. It had tripled in just that time. But I figured 17 years experience in ceramic tile, I would find a job no problem. And I could not get one. It was a kind of a freeze on hirings during that time of the Gulf War. Everywhere I went, no, we're not hiring right now. Wait. And in my haste, I answered an ad in newspaper for sports advisory, which I thought, being a guy who had already been a bettor and somebody who liked the idea of being part of a team that handicaps games together, I answered the ad only to find out it was a boiler room operation. Oh. And for those of us that are in this industry that have actually lived that, like I did, you know what I'm talking about. When you live that, you appreciate what we do now in this business, John, even more. But I was there for about 2 years. I've got, XXX amount of stories that we won't get into now about that industry in particular in the 2 years I spent there. But I couldn't do it. With a good conscience, I couldn't do it. I was more interested in providing advice that, was legitimate advice. Do the work, advise, see where the chips land. At any rate, I left and I began a newsletter for myself, a tout sheet, so to speak, much in the line of Gold Sheet, Winning Point, Sports Reporter, all the ones anybody would have heard of. I began one in 1992. By the time 1996 came, I had a partner with me. We third-partied with a guy to finance us, to back us, and the newsletter wound up in 33 casinos up and down the strip, sitting right next to Gold Sheet, Winning Points, Sports Reporter. It was fantastic for me.
Oh, I bet.
Got a little notoriety from that. Did radio shows in Las Vegas during that time, but at that point, I began to do casino-driven shows where in Las Vegas, for those who live there and know, there'd be a Wednesday night show from a certain sports book, a Thursday night show from a different sports book. So we're doing live shows, live contests. I was invited into the Stardust Invitational twice, which I mean was the dream of all dreams to be one of the 16 picked to be in that. I got connected with a guy named Tim Truschel who had his own radio show called the Las Vegas Sports Line at the time. He asked me for 15 minutes, John. He said, listen, can you give me 15 minutes? I'll let you do spring football. And I went on, I did 15 minutes of spring football and hung up the phone and got a call back 2 minutes later. He said, Rob, that's the best 15 minutes I've ever had on the show. Would you come on full time? So actually, Las Vegas Sports Wire is where Sports Memo began. Tim was the founder of Sports Memo. So I've been with that company since 1998, a long, long time. Now we see what it's developed into. It's been sold and resold to the WagerTalk people. And then from Sports Memo, a couple of years, Johnny and Prez and Marco, who run it, pulled me up to WagerTalk. They said, we need you here. So I'm here now, glad to be here, but it's a long-winded way of saying I came from a blue-collar background and fell into this business, basically. I mean, I just happened to have a little bit of something that people thought was great and put me in this seat now. So I'm happy to be here.
That's an awesome story, Rob. Man alive. Yeah, that's I mean it's so true in like any walk of life, I guess. I don't want to, start preaching here or anything, but you just never know where that next turn in the road is going to be and what's going to happen. I myself didn't think that when I started this as a hobby back in the late 90s, Steve Merrill and I were on the same site, and I think you were on it too at one time. But my energy was devoted to providing something that was honest. We had those Saturday morning shows, and I would listen to it, and I just could not believe that people would listen to this and actually think that they had locker room information about the quarterback's dog, and this created a game of the year situation. It blew my mind. So that was the reason that it motivated me to do it. And much to your credit with the boiler room scenes, I can't even imagine. But the best of you has come out of that, no doubt in the world. And for those that aren't familiar with the WagerTalk shows, they air just about, I would say, almost half the day. It starts out with a hockey show, and then we get into the noon show, which is the Prez, which Rob referenced him, and he's a riot. Then they get into college hoops, which I believe, Rob, you appear on quite often. And then there's an NBA show, which has a lot of laughs too, but it also has some great information. So, if you're going to spend your valuable time listening to the shows, you can't make a mistake listening to any of the ones that air on WagerTalk.com. So that's my promotion for today. And always remember, I'm much better bragging about other people than I am myself. But that's a great story, Rob. Man alive. Well, I'm glad you're sitting here, I'll tell you. And that's just awesome. I can't get over it. So do you want to talk about, I guess let's talk about that first game we were mentioning off air, and that is the Duke-Louisville game.
Yeah.
And, as an intro, I saw on DraftKings, they have a line that says Duke gets in, Duke does not get in. So if Duke gets in, you get plus 800. That's what it was this morning. And the odds for Duke to win the the ACC tournament is astronomical. It's 20,000. So that would be 200 to 1. And what that was telling me, at least in my interpretation of it, is that Duke doesn't have to win the tournament to get in. That maybe if they win this game tonight and play hard against, I think it will be Florida State, that they might get in. And quite frankly, I don't think they deserve to get in unless they win the ACC. I mean, they didn't play well against North Carolina. That was awful. And, they beat Boston College. Okay, that's a win. But what do you see in this game tonight, Rob?
Well, first off, John, I don't see Duke getting into the NCAA tournament unless, as you mentioned, I would echo your sentiment that they would have to run the table and win this tournament. I think, depending on which one of these bracketologists that you listen to, most of them will tell you the same exact thing, that Duke needs more than just a win over Louisville tonight to get themselves there. The resume has been pretty damaged along the way. We have a running joke on the college basketball show for WagerTalk because I was assigned to do Tuesdays on that show, and it seemed like every Tuesday Duke was on the board, dating way back to January. And the host Joe Ranieri had asked the three panelists individually, "Do you trust Duke? Do you trust Duke? Do you trust Duke?" And I think in unison we said, "Well, ask us in mid-February when Jalen Johnson comes back. Maybe we'll have a different opinion of this team." And mid-February came, and we're like, "Well, ask us in late February." And late February came, and there was no ask us in March. It's we don't trust Duke. I don't think they'll win tonight. As you mentioned, I think it's a nice, 15 3-pointers and a win over BC. That's good. BC is a team with about 6 scholarship players, so take that for what it's worth. Louisville has defeated this team twice already this season. Certainly Duke has had their issues with them. One time they did have Jalen Johnson. There was one game after he left the team, so you can pick and choose whichever box score you want to read into. But the bottom line is Duke has lost twice to them. Duke has not covered against Louisville. They've been both a dog and a favorite, lost each way. They've been home and away, lost each way. I don't think that they do it here tonight, John. There is always the conference tournament handicapping angle of these neutral site venues, right? And Duke does have a game under their belt in Greensboro Coliseum last night, and Louisville comes in and it's their first game, and maybe they have immediate problems and Duke sneaks by. Even if they do, they probably don't get past tomorrow, but I don't even think they get past tonight. I think Chris Mack's team is a better defensive team, and Duke way too reliant on one player, Matthew Hurt, and way reliant on one sort of a one-trick pony with their three-point shooting. So unless they outscore Louisville in a high-scoring game, I don't see it happening. I would probably play Louisville.
Yeah, and I think the market's telling us that too. The public, I believe, is on Duke because they are Duke, and Duke's going to make a run. And that's a good gut feeling to have. But when you see Louisville getting points, and on my numbers, they actually are the better team at both ends of the court. Both teams have been really erratic this year. I think you'd agree with that. So you really don't know what addition you're going to get. But after games where Duke played as well as they did, you've referenced those 3-point made shots. They rarely repeated that. And if anything, they regressed below their average stats for the season. So I like your pick quite a bit on Louisville, and then that would make it very easy for the committee to say Duke is not in if they lose tonight.
Yeah, that is the easy way out, John. Just lose a game, and that way they don't have to worry about some long decisions in that room if Duke were to do better. But they just don't seem to have the necessary ingredients to go the distance here in this tourney.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. Another game you mentioned, one I'm really interested to hear your breakdown of, is the Penn State game. And pulling it up on my sheet here, Penn State, it's obviously not a home game. It's in Indianapolis, but it's Nebraska as the away team. Penn State's the home team. Line opened up at 7. I'm seeing 6.5 now, but it seems like the bigger money actually is coming in on Penn State. Kind of hard to read that, but what's your take on this game?
Well, I looked at it this morning early from a totals perspective. I just, they played very recently, late February. I think it was about 4 games ago. And the game got into the upper 160s, which, is indicative of the style that these two want to play. Certainly Nebraska has had their issues shooting the ball and watching it go through the net this year, and that's a reason why they've played lower scoring games. It's not necessarily because of tempo or pace, which Fred Hoiberg, as we know from his Iowa State days, wants to get up and down the floor. And Penn State, a team that really wants to get up and down the floor, a team that suffered numerous heartbreaking losses this season. They've been competitive in most every game. But to me, the style of the game, the matchup of this game just shapes up as a game where both teams can get up and down, where both teams are able to score. I know in the first meeting, I think it was like a 62-61 game, which is a far cry from the most recent one. So you kind of have your choice there, which way you believe. Do you believe it'll go back to lower scoring, maybe because there's desperation on the line for these two teams? They're only into the NCAA tournament, like so many other teams across the country, is to win 4 or 5 in 5 days. So you can have that angle. But I think that in this particular case, the matchup just takes precedence here. I think that Penn State will be a team that doesn't find it hard to score against Nebraska, much like they didn't in their most recent game. And even if Nebraska finds it a hair bit difficult, John, I can see them finding their way to 70 points in this game. If they find their way to 70 points and Penn State, puts up 77, you've got yourself an over. And if that's your starting point, then I think it's a pretty good play up and over the total. I just don't see it going any differently than that. I could always be wrong. We do this 365 days a year. We're constantly wrong, but we like to be right more than we're wrong. And I think in this case, it was defined to me way back in 1991 when I first got to Las Vegas by an experienced gambler, a longtime gambler. He said betting games is nothing more than putting yourself in the best position to win. And I think you put yourself in the best position to win in this one if you play over.
Yeah, that's good. Good breakdown. Got a couple team trends and coaching trends here. I'll support you on that. Ferry is 11-2 over off an upset win over conference rival as an underdog in all games he's coached for Penn State. And that game obviously is the upset win that Penn State had over Maryland. And as you said, they could have, would have, should have is Penn State this year. They had Ohio State beat. They kind of remind me of Iowa at times, where they forget to play defense for like 3-4 minutes in the second half, and then the game gets away from them, and they end up losing. But this is clearly a game that they can win, and I think if they win it, the over is going to come through. Hoiberg is 28-12 after allowing 75 points or more in 2 straight games in all games that he's coached. So I think those two coaching trends are quite strong. And I know you would agree with me that when you get into the conference tournaments, and especially the NCAA, coaching takes on a much, much bigger importance than during the regular season.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. And I mean, I made a play the other night in the Colonial Athletic Association tournament on a game where, every game isn't the same handicap, but in that particular game, I played Bill Cohen, the head coach of Northeastern, against Drexel, figuring that Cohen had a little bit of an edge over Drexel, and it didn't pan out, but it is something to consider in these tournaments. John, there's one thing I left out of that particular handicap and the Big Ten tournament overall that I really want to point out here is that, when we talk about shooting and sight lines and first time in a venue, neutral site venues, whatever, it's always my theory that I don't put a lot of credence into it unless the tournament is held in a football stadium. This tournament is being held at Lucas Oil Stadium. It's a football stadium. It's more difficult to shoot at. The surroundings are so much further away from the court than they are in a basketball arena. And to that, for years and years and years, the theory that you subscribe to is you look towards unders in the opening. Now, and we'll get to this a little later when we get through the Big Ten tournament, but in this case, I don't believe that Penn State, although they're a pretty good three-point shooting team, and Nebraska have to rely on three-point shooting to get their share of points in this game. These teams both attack the rim. There should be a lot of fouls, depending upon your referee crew, of course, but you get a lot of whistles in this. So I'm not relying on three-pointers, which is a reason why I'm on over here. But if I was relying on 2 3-point shooting teams in their first game in a football stadium, I don't think I'd be playing over.
I agree. A buddy of mine, I think you know him too, Kyle Hunter. I had him on the first show of the day. And I didn't know this. Madison Square Garden, not a football stadium, but with no fans, I think that too, the depth perception is different. I've tried to shoot hoops down at the Wells Fargo Center where the Sixers play and Villanova plays. Mm-hmm. And when there's no fans in the stands, you really do struggle. But he told me, I believe it was 84-30 to the under for first half totals at Madison Square Garden in the tournament. And that was stunning. So if I'm not right on the actual wins and losses, trust me, for those that are listening, it's an amazing trend. And it makes total sense with what Rob is tying in with playing in a football stadium with, it won't be many fans there, and depth perception has to be a problem.
Yeah, there's no question. And like I say, I'll just segue into it, John, real quick, so then we can be done with it. But in the case of Iowa winning that Big Ten tournament, the first game is going to be crucial for them. If they get their shooting going, they're as dangerous as anybody. But if they struggle in that first game, they're one and done in that tournament. So that's the type of thing we're talking about. Just, it's not the entire handicap, believe me, and I'm sure you'll back me on this. When we handicap games, it's not make a power rating. I say the line should be this. The odds maker says that. I'm betting my way. There's so many different things, so many situational things that go into each individual handicap that, it's more than just the sight lines. But as you can tell, I mean, I'm playing over in one game, and I'm telling you that another team might be one and done in that tournament. Yep. But it depends on how you play the game.
And I'm not sure how the bracket's set up, but it made me think that a team like a Penn State, let's say they hit lightning in the bottle, they learn how to win instead of losing these close games. They'll have 2 games under their belt when they come up against an Iowa or even a Minnesota or an Illinois, or I forget who's at the top, obviously Michigan.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. Penn State's in the bottom half, so if they were to advance, it would be against Wisconsin, and then if they won that, they would advance to playing Iowa, and then
there it is
onto the semis against whoever. But to your point, it'll be Penn State's 3rd game against Iowa's first chance shooting in Lucas Oil Stadium. So practice is different than actual game shooting, and Iowa's got terrific shooters.
No doubt there. Probably the most efficient offense in the country.
Yeah, they've got one key injury as well, but we both know, you do this long enough, these basketball tournaments are one bad day from being eliminated. So especially these conference tournaments, it can happen, believe me.
That's something to keep in mind when we get into later in the week here with that situation. Even if it's not Penn State, it's teams that have played 2 games going against a favorite. It's probably going to be a double-digit favorite possibly that has not played a game yet. That's good stuff. I like that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes total sense as well. So, you don't get those opportunities, John, those situations all that often. But when you do, they're nice to get on quickly before other people recognize it.
Yep, absolutely. That's what these shows are all about. That's why I love them, because I always learn something, and here it is. So I think you wanted to talk about another game, Iowa State, Oklahoma, which is a big one for both teams in the Big 12. And Oklahoma, both teams are in must-win situations, obviously, and I believe that both of those teams are kind of in the tournament. I wanted to get your take on that as well. Some people say, certainly Oklahoma's not a bubble team, but Iowa State could possibly be on the way out unless they win tonight. So let's hear your breakdown on this one.
Yeah, this one is so much more simplistic, John, which is, again, the difference in individual handicaps, right? Sometimes they're simple, sometimes they're gut feeling, sometimes they're more complicated. But for me, Oklahoma comes in on a bad losing streak, 4 straight games. The team is far better than that, but it's the product of a Big 12 where these teams just, for lack of a better term, and a term that's used far too frequently, but they cannibalize each other. They lose 2 very close games to Oklahoma State. They lose an extremely close game the other night to Texas. Now they come in, they play Iowa State, who is basically the doormat of this conference this year. They're about 11.5, which is a big number in any conference tournament because, again, a lot of these games are played from the underdog's perspective as desperation games. It's their end of season, basically, so they go all out. But I don't think Oklahoma's going to have any problem here. The defense, that they play is tremendous. They've got a lot of upper class leadership on this team. They're not the best 3-point shooting team in the world, but they get enough buckets close, and I think that the matchup here lends itself to them getting interior baskets in this particular game. They'll be motivated. Again, you talked about coaching earlier. Lon Kruger is a guy that you would like to have your money on in spots like this. I think they're actually, as the 7 seed, John, I think they're actually a long shot to win this tournament. It's a tournament of, aside from Baylor, who is your clear-cut favorite, it's a grouping of teams that are very, very equal in capability. So for me, Oklahoma, they sit in the bottom half of the bracket. They wouldn't have to see Baylor until the very end. But as for just tonight's game, I think this is probably one of those double-digit routes. I don't think Iowa State gets anything off easy. Oklahoma State comes to play from the get-go, and to me, it's as simple as that. It's a team coming in desperate need of a win, already a tournament team, but I think they want to prove something in this tournament.
Well, I definitely agree with you. I apologize for saying that Iowa State. I was thinking of a different team being on the bubble. Obviously, they're winless in the conference, and they have been the doormat. But Iowa State has so many trends that I'm looking at right now off the database that it's just take my word for it. If you're listening on the show here, there's really nothing I can find that would make me want to even entertain the thought of betting on Oklahoma. It very much reminds me of the Duke game last night against Boston College, where you have a team that's up against the wall and positively has to put out a tremendous effort, which Duke did. And I think Oklahoma here is in the same boat. But I know they were at plus 2,500 in the conference, and I'm looking at the odds now. They're down to 1,500, and I think that's because Kansas has a pretty significant injury on their team. Is that right?
Right. David McCormick, the center, come down with coronavirus, so he's out for the entire tournament, and that basically eliminates Kansas from winning this tournament. To have to regroup at this stage, if he had tested positive 3 games ago and they had 3 games coming in to sort things out, but at this point, John, just entering flat-footed without him, I just don't see any way in this particular conference with these teams. I don't see any way they get through.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Yeah, I'd like to see them get in more than Duke. I kind of have maybe it's a toxicity that I'm not happy whenever a team doesn't make it. That's had such a streak with them because obviously these kids have parents and they I get that whole thing. So I try not to hate anybody, but I wouldn't be losing out on any sleep if Duke did not make it in the tournament. Anything else you want to go over?
Well, real quick, we can just skim through these conference tournaments. Again, like I said to you earlier, I am not a futures player by any means. If I like a particular team, I'd almost rather money line them throughout the tourney. I think you get better odds. Obviously, the odds makers take a lot of juice in these conference tournament odds or any future odds. The only ones that I will play, John, are season over/under win totals. I think I've played, NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL. I can get involved there, but as far as these to win tournament style numbers, I don't get involved. But real quick, I'll just look in the ACC. It should be Florida State. It's the best team. But if you're looking for a long shot, Georgia Tech's got to be considered. And as the number 4 seed, they don't look like a long shot. But with that backcourt of Alvarado and DeVoe, and of course the way Moses Wright is playing right now and the way they close down the stretch, Josh Pastner's got something going on there with Georgia Tech. So I would not be surprised if there is a long shot to come out of there. It was them. But I think the favorite probably goes there, Florida State. Big East, a tournament. Now, you're from New York, and I'm from Connecticut, the tri-state area. I visited a lot of Big East tournaments in the day when the Big East was the Big East.
St. John's, Georgetown, Villanova.
Yeah, I remember Jerome Lane on Pittsburgh and a whole bunch of good times down there. It's not quite the same now, but much like we just talked about Kansas, for those who don't know, you probably should know, Villanova's pretty much cooked in this tournament with the injury to Connor Gillespie, and then it follows up with an injury to Justin Moore who's at least out for this game, probably longer. So Villanova's in deep trouble, which kind of puts it in Creighton's lap to go ahead and win this thing. I'm not so sure that they will. Their first opponent would be the winner of Xavier Butler. Xavier's actually 1-1 this year against Creighton and 2-0 against the spread. So from a betting standpoint, if Xavier gets by Butler tonight, you might want to look at them against Creighton. But I think, and I don't want to be a homer here, just because I'm close to the program, but UConn, Danny Hurley has them peaking at the right time of year. And when you see them on the floor, it's hard to find shortcomings, John. It's hard. They've got a backcourt offensively that's capable of getting to the rim and shooting distance. Interior-wise, with Sonogo and Carlton, they've got inside play. On the defensive end, they play all out as good as anybody in the Big East. So it's kind of there for UConn to get to, too. We'll see. Creighton's the better offensive team if it were to come down to that. But I think UConn could present a little bit of value in that particular conference. Big Ten, I should probably ask you for your opinion. I mean, everybody wants to see the Illinois-Michigan rematch, I'm sure. But it may not be. I'll just very quickly give you one team that I think could come off the pace here a little bit and maybe steal this, and that's Purdue. The downside to Purdue is the amount of freshmen that play on this team, but it's often been said by wiser coaches or wiser people than myself, by this time of year, they're not freshmen anymore, and Purdue's freshmen have really played extremely well, and they do have the dominant big man. The venue, which you and I spoke about earlier, really doesn't concern Purdue. They're not making a living from three-point land. They make their living from inside the three-point arc. So I don't worry about them so much where venue is concerned. In two-point shooting this year, they're third in the Big Ten, 52% from the field shooting twos, and they're third in defensive efficiency if you go by Ken Pom numbers. So this is a team that's elite on both levels and could surprise. I would probably say Purdue if you don't like Illinois or Michigan, if you want to avoid Illinois or Michigan. And again, I'll reiterate, if Iowa finds their shooting stroke, they're always, they're like the George Foreman of boxing, puncher's chance with the way they can light up a scoreboard in a hurry. And they've actually played a little bit better defense down the stretch. But, you're the Big Ten guy. Let me ask, what do you like?
Well, I guess I'm the popular choice of Illinois, and I do want to see that rematch. I think Illinois, based on my stuff, I put a lot of credence into assist-to-turnover ratios and then adjusted for opponent. And Illinois is at both ends of the court very good at playing sound fundamental basketball. They take care of the ball. They force turnovers at the right times. They're not trying to be overly aggressive all the time. They seem to apply the clamps at the right time. And, Michigan has had that magical season. And, they're one of those teams now that I think is, had that loss. And that was a bad loss. And you're kids, and I was there. You were there, and you get your face ripped off, and all of a sudden you're sitting in the locker room thinking like, oh my God, I guess we're not as good as we thought we were. And of course, great coaching then can correct that. But I do think Illinois is the pick. Iowa, saw so many times during the season, Garza would get 2 fouls, and coach would take him out. Didn't matter when it was in the first half. It could be 3 minutes to go in the half. He was out. And I think those situations, clearly, if you look at the plus-minus, that really hurt the team. But several players now down the stretch have stepped up when Garza is on the bench. They depend a lot on the outside shot, as you said. They're certainly qualified to win this thing. But I think the most fundamentally sound team right now in the Big Ten is Illinois. And that's my bet to win it. I also, put down pizza money so far on them for the NCAA tournament. But now because of our conversation, Creighton is another team that kind of is like a little brother Illinois. Does that make sense? Like they kind of play similar styles of game. Creighton's very good at assist-to-turnover ratio at both ends of the court. And I was looking them up while you were speaking. They're 25-1 to win the championship. and that has to be flying under the radar. So I think there's some value there for what it's worth at Creighton at plus 2,500 for the NCAA tournament. And speaking of long shots, I got to ask you about Loyola Chicago. I actually have pizza money at 50 to 1. It's down to 45 to 1 because their play has been good, but it's in a weak conference. Do you think they could actually make it to the Elite Eight?
That's the beauty of those long numbers, right? Because if you can advance into, as you mentioned, the Elite Eight at least, you can hedge your way out of that and make money no matter what. So that's the beauty of 40 to 1, 25 to 1. You don't have to win the tournament to make a profit out of this. Loyola, a team, obviously, in the tournament, you want one predicated on defense because you know it's always going to show up. I mean, I love offense, and you have to make shots to win. There's no question. If you can't make shots, you're not going to win. But you have to have a defensive-oriented team. The head coach here, fantastic. Loyola's been through it before, so I don't think there's anything that's going to have them in awe, so to speak. You know what I mean? Walk into the venue and be like, oh, my God, we're here, and then it gets away from them. So, that's a team that's been put through the rigors. It's a program that's been put through the rigors, and they've come out the other side. So you definitely could see them in an NCAA tournament. We don't know the draw ahead of time, right? The draw could be real good for Loyola. We don't know. But for those who are watching and think that, when John says 40 to 1 means they have to go all the way, don't think of it that way. You have to think of it as winning a couple of games and then start looking at other options, because at 40 to 1, you've got a lot of leeway to work with. 25 to 1, you've got a lot of leeway to work with to come out profitable.
In fact, I've actually, I do some machine learning stuff, and that's a fancy word that I actually hate because there's so many people out there that like to say it, but they don't know what it means. And, that's a whole other topic. But I actually have Loyola right now as an 8 seed, and they could be matched up against an Oklahoma or a Florida. And I would have to think that if they're matched up against those two teams, that they would probably be, 3.5, 4-point underdog?
On a neutral site, and I'm somebody who keeps power ratings on all teams, so I'm going to take 2 seconds just to look real quick, John, at what I would have that on a neutral. And this is showing me, dependent upon, of course, what Florida does throughout the SEC tourney, their number could drop or rise. I show them currently as 4.5 on a neutral floor. So
favorite or dog?
Favorite. Florida the favorite. If it were to be Florida. If it were to be Oklahoma, it's a 0.5 point more. It's 5 with Oklahoma on a neutral. So obviously there's no regions this year. We're all in Indianapolis or Indiana, the state of Indiana. So there's no home bias for teams. True neutral settings.
Yeah, that's something to write down too. Even the people in the chat room or listening later in the archived edition, I think that's should that happen, 8 against 9, those are always the hardest to predict. But I think if it would be Loyola as the 8 seed, that would probably be one of my best bets over there at Sports Memo, and it might even be a 5%er when the day is done. And I would see them winning outright.
You know that phrase we hear too often, John? You don't want to see them in the tournament. You hear that
That's right.
all the time from the media. And Loyola of Chicago is one team that does apply to. I mean, it's an overused phrase, but if you're going to apply it to somebody, you don't want to see Loyola Chicago in the first round of the tournament.
Especially if you're Florida, or one of these blue blood programs that hasn't had an outstanding season by their standards. Even in North Carolina, which I have right now as a 10 seed. I'm sure they would probably be favored by less. Maybe it's a pick 'em. But Loyola against North Carolina, I think the public would be betting the daylights out of North Carolina. But we'll have to wait and see, and that's the fun part of this whole thing. Mm-hmm. The unknown, and then you either look like a genius on some of these plays, or you just look like a complete buffoon, But that's what makes it fun. Absolutely.
I'm going to go real quick here. we'll go through the Pac-12, which I think should be Oregon. Ever since Will Richardson has come back, it's just a different team. They're the most talented starting five in that league, bar any. I mean, somebody could try and argue me USC, but I would tell you player for player starting five. Oregon's the more talented team. Since Will Richardson has returned, they're 10-2 straight up. They're 7-3 against the spread in their last 10. They're 4-0 against the spread in their last 4. So they're heading in here red hot at this point in time. A lot of confidence. Again, let's point toward a coach, Dana Altman for Oregon, an extremely good coach. If it's not Oregon, it could be Colorado. I mean, again, let's go back to tournament. I don't want to call them theories, but things that we associate with winning teams in a tournament, and that's guard play. And McKinley Wright might be the best guard in the league, and he leads Colorado. Very quickly, Colorado, in order to do this, would have to face USC and Evan Mobley and Taj Eady and the whole gang there for Andy Enfield. But against USC this year, how about this? Colorado's 2-0, and they weren't close. 80-62, 72-62. They contained Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley scores 13 and 12 in those two games. So I think Colorado, if it's not going to be Oregon, which it should, it would be Colorado. That's a fascinating team that a lot of people probably don't get to look at very much, So I would say one of those two teams. And then SEC, ahead of my notes, it's funny. Should be Alabama, Arkansas. They're the 1 and 2. The odds makers are telling us that's what it should be. But in my mind, it could be any 6 teams in the top 7. That's as wide open a conference tournament as there is. Obviously, Alabama is extremely talented. Arkansas has come on. Eric Musselman has been there before. We talked about Loyola Chicago. The team they defeated that year in the Elite Eight, or the Final Four, I think it was the Elite Eight, was Nevada under Eric Musselman. So he's been there before. But the other teams, 6 of those top 7, I would go so far as to say Conzo Martin and the Missouri Tigers. I don't know what their odds are, John, but
600.
They have an opportunity for those watching. They've already defeated Alabama. I believe they've split with Arkansas. I think they beat them once, they lost once. But if you're looking for a team that's got the interior with Jeremiah Tillman, that's got the exterior, the three-point shooters, the shot makers, Xavier Pinson, Drew Smith, Mark Smith, Mitchell Smith underneath to help Tillman. They've got the ingredients, and we know Martin's team will play defense. So to me, of all the power conferences we've talked about, that is the most wide open, and I wouldn't be surprised to see neither Alabama or Arkansas win that thing.
Yeah, that's where you're getting the value. I can't agree more. I'm looking at the odds now. The 7th team, I believe you would say, is Kentucky. They're plus 1,500. So the way they play, that should be plus 1,500.
Right.
But to your point, LSU, Tennessee, Florida, Missouri are all within plus 100 of one another. LSU plus 500, Tennessee 5.25, Florida 575, and Missouri 600. You can't get any closer than that.
Yeah, they all have a chance, every one of them. I mean, LSU probably more of a puncher's chance, as we referred to with Iowa, the offensive team that doesn't necessarily play a lot of defense under Will Wade. But, I mean, trying to contain 4 of those starting 5 is tough to do. And we've seen teams catch fire in 4-day stints more often than not. So, I just feel like Alabama and Arkansas maybe – neither one gets to the finish line there.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of, I actually requested this Parks Casinos down in Philly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Gonzaga is favored to win the NCAA tournament. So I asked them to create a line that is Gonzaga. You can pick them, or you can pick any Big Ten team that's in the tournament. If neither one of them win, it's a no-action bet. But I think you know who I would take. And I, for the same reasons that you see Alabama and Arkansas not being the winner, I see the same thing with Baylor and Gonzaga not being the winner. Not that I don't like them, not that I'm looking for value, just like you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see any value in taking Gonzaga or Baylor. But in Illinois, I think it's 22-1. Yeah, I'll be all over that.
I think what's extremely unique, John, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, it's okay.
I think what's extremely unique about Illinois is you could legitimately argue the fact that they have the best guard and the best center of all teams that are going to participate. I mean, in Dosunmu and in Kofor, you have, I mean, if they're not the best, they're top 3 at their position, and they're both on the same team. So tournament style play, and once they get out of the Big Ten, where these other teams don't know them very well, and they, you know, when you get to those Thursday, Saturday, you play a team on Saturday, you've only had one day to prep for them, they're going to be a handful. So I would agree with you wholeheartedly that, you know, under those circumstances, Illinois would be a great bet. I should have gone over to Parks and taken a look at that.
Well, I haven't heard back from them. I sent an email, so I don't know if they're going to come back with something or not. But I thought it was a pretty cool, you know, like kind of like a prop bet. But you know, I wanted to mention too, and I know you do this as well, is the money line rollover. So you have the futures. So like in the SEC, let's take, like you say, you like Missouri. And they'll probably be a favorite in that first game. So you play the money line, and then you roll it. So if you bet 100, you win. You take the original 100, not the 100 plus your profit, which some people have asked me about. You just take the original 100, you roll it again, and sooner or later, Missouri's going to face Arkansas or Alabama. They're going to be an underdog. The public's going to be on the favorite. You're going to get a really juicy money line, and you make out so much better doing that than you would putting, say, 200 or 300 on the futures line. So just food for thought, I guess.
Yeah, no, and that's most professional gamblers will tell you that's the way to go. Don't take the advanced future odds because they're shaved down to where they're not in your favor. Just take your money exactly as you explained it. Play it, win, roll it over, win, roll it. It's the same thing, really. You're betting a team to win the whole thing. So that's how I would do it. It turns out to be more money in the end if you're correct on your assessments. So we'll see. These are going to be a fun few days, John. And then I think even more fun is probably when the selections are made and the process that guys like you and I go through on Sunday night into the, 3, 4 a.m.s of the morning trying to sort all this stuff out so we can be ahead of the game quicker. So, yeah, it's a busy time. It's a fun time for sure.
Yeah, it's a great time. And I'm a golfer too, Rob. So I did a show yesterday with David Behrman, who I know you're friends with at ESPN, and both of us love golf, and I've played that course a lot of times. In fact, I can honestly say that if I had one day to go and one course to choose, it would either be Winged Foot or Sawgrass, and it would probably be Sawgrass. So I get wound up like you can't believe when this thing starts tomorrow. So, on the golfing note, Patrick Cantlay is my best bet to win on a side note from the college hoops. So we'll see what happens. But that's going to be a great tournament.
I have to write that down as somebody who doesn't handicap golf, who doesn't follow golf whatsoever. I have to write down Patrick Cantlay. I have to take
Cantlay, Fleetwood, and Adam Scott. Adam Scott's 50-1. The guy's won there 2004. He always plays well in Florida. And I don't know why he's 50-1. It's not like he was playing bad last week or the week before. He seems to be in pretty good form. And, on a course like Sawgrass is, he's the type of guy that can do it. You don't have to hit it 350. And I don't know if you heard this on 18. It's a dogleg left with water on the left that runs the whole length of the hole. It's intimidating as hell. I don't care if you draw the ball. You get on that tee box, you're not going to draw the ball. You're going to bail right, and then you have your problems. But DeChambeau was actually considering going left over the lake into an area that is the 9th fairway and playing the hole from there. So he would have less than probably 100 yards in from where he was targeting it. So the PGA quickly announced I forget what it's called, an inside out of bounds rule. So they put up these special stakes on the other side of the lake. So if you hit over that, you're out of bounds.
Oh, so he's got a lady.
Yeah, so it's pretty ridiculous actually when these players are thinking this kind of stuff. I've been on that course, and I don't know if I could even hit my driver across the lake going left to be within 250 yards of the green. You know what I mean? But on, I think it was on Golf Channel last night, they announced, and I'll just tell you this real quick, 'cause I thought it was pretty funny because it involves Chi Rodriguez. So Hinkle, the guy who won in, I guess, 1974, it might have been the U.S. Open, he did a similar thing. He cut into a fairway that was running adjacent to the hole he was playing, got himself much, much closer. It was a par 5, and it had a lot to do with his first round score. The next day, they get to that tee, and there's a 25-foot spruce tree trying to block his way from doing it again. So then Chi actually hits it over the spruce and says, I thought they were bringing in a tree, not a Christmas tree. I just remember these fun stories, but I thought that was kind of neat. But the way these modern day golfers think about distance, and it's beyond my understanding.
Yeah, the stuff they do, it's precision golf, that's for sure. It's something that even the everyday golfer just can't really dream of executing these shots that they execute. I don't even think TV does it justice when you do look at it. It doesn't. A lot of it doesn't even seem real, the way it has. Looks like some kind of magic act sometimes.
And you have to be there live to hear the sound. Those guys make a different sound when they drive the ball, and that's all that's the best way I can describe it. And I've never made that sound. So, well, Rob, I want to make sure our listeners know what you have going on tap. I know you have, I think, 2 pretty big plays going tonight, and then anything else you want to promote for the rest of the week would be just great to hear.
Yeah, really quick. Selection packages are up and available for college hoop tonight at WagerTalk.com. You just go to the WagerTalk homepage and then click on my homepage, and you'll see the selections right there available for purchase. NBA will be up as soon as we conclude the show. Just for what it's worth, over the course of this season, 2020-2021, I sit at WagerTalk as the number 2 ranked college basketball handicapper in profits earned, and the number 2 ranked NBA handicapper in profits earned. So we've had a pretty successful run of it, John. And real quick, I'll just promote tomorrow very quickly for anybody watching that hasn't tuned in to a WagerTalk show. Go ahead and tune in tomorrow. John hinted towards it before, and this stuff is free. All you have to do is subscribe to WagerTalk, a free subscription. Tomorrow I'll be part of the NBA tip-off show, which I'm frequently a part of. And also, I want to just go ahead and throw out there the FCS football show that mid-major Matt Josephs and I do together each and every Thursday night. Certainly FCS, it's in a standalone season here in the spring because they opted out of the fall season. But it's still college football. It still has point spreads. It still has totals, and we're still trying to get paid. So you can watch us tomorrow. We'll give you our best advice on the FCS upcoming weekend.
Well, you'll see my name on that NBA show. I provide a kind of a betting system of the day.
Yes.
I put together 25 of them, and it's kind of funny sometimes because I'm not on the show, so I can't comment. But it's funny sometimes, the reaction, and it's all in good humor. But they've done fairly decent. It's a basket of 25 that I selected, and they back test 62% against the spread last 5 years. That doesn't mean it's going to be 62 going forward, but you would like to think that they're going to make some money over the course of the season. And I love how these guys tease me from afar sometimes. The SDQL thing, and
right.
And then we had the not Krispy Kreme. It was. With Steve, it was I can't remember what it was. Anyway, it's just a great show to watch. You're going to laugh, you're going to learn a lot, and it's really a lot of fun. And one last thing, believe me, when he says he's number 2, if you've never been to WagerTalk, you go and look at the bios of all the guys that are on that site. It's no joke. It's legends, and I totally mean that. And when you're number 2 among the big fish in a big pond, that's saying a hell of a lot. So don't underestimate any of those guys there, especially Rob. So I guess that'll put the ribbon on it for us tonight, and I'm really glad you joined me tonight, Rob, and I'm sure you're going to be on again, and I can't wait for that, and I just hope I get some sleep before that Players' Championship starts, otherwise I won't make it to Sunday.
Well, I hope you do too, John. I appreciate you having me here. And like we've said before, every show, including this one that we do, whether company-based or outside of the company, as this one is, we're just here to try and help inform and help you guys become better betters. That's all it is. We're just trying to help you use what we've learned. I've been in this industry since 1992. That's now 29 years. I'm pretty good at math, otherwise I wouldn't be in this industry. But 29 years worth of what I had to learn, and each and every day when we speak and analyze, we're just trying to help you become better. So hopefully it works. And John, again, I wish you success on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So for the Predictive Playbook, this is John Ryan, and may all the wins be yours.